Okay, it's time for Bring It In. It's Friday. This is TrueHoop's little Zoom from quarantine show. Huge thanks to David and Jarod for holding down the fort on Wednesday while I was sitting in a parked car outside the hospital. Don't worry, everything's fine. But
I told everybody DNPCD. You can't do back to back. You gotta worry about the playoffs. Like
it's just administration stuff. You gotta check the boxes. You gotta take the people to the places. You sign the form. There's just stuff you gotta do. Later, we're going to be joined by Tom Haberstroh to give us a little follow-up on his first story for TrueHoop. But right now, on Friday, we have our 9x90 tradition. We have 9 topics for 90 seconds each. We take turns, and Jarod goes first.
Well, GameStop is, the talk of everything and leading everyone's lives. And there's so many different pieces we're going to get into, and we will later on in the show. But there's something here that really appealed to me in this story about GameStop, and it is not so much the people who are going to make the money, not make the money. There is a point here where the collective will of the people actually band together to actually overthrow or stop the elite ruling class. And that to me is a wonderful thing. The realization that, and because I always say it, guys, like we got to hold these people accountable. The work never stops. It continues. There are more of us than them. What you saw yesterday and the past few days driving that stock price up was all of us regular people deciding, well, wait a minute, let's do something that, to stop these people from really hurting us. And it was beautiful. If we can take that type of cooperative spirit out into politics and everything else, the world might actually be better. Because again, the elites, yes, they have the money and all that, but we are the people. There's more of us. If we decide 10 people out in Omaha buying one share, but it wasn't just 10 people. It was hundreds of thousands and millions of people doing it. That's what we need if we're going to try to make this a more level playing field and a just society. So kudos to the people on the subreddit forum.
All right, so I'm starting a new thing every week. My first entry is going to be a little thing called Fuck These Guys. And the only sad thing is there's lots of people to choose from. So we can play. Some of you may have heard this guy yesterday on CNBC.
Cooperman.
Can you hear it, Judy?
I can't hear it.
Together and pull together. The reason the market is doing what it's doing is people are sitting at home getting the checks from the government, okay? And this fair share is a bullshit concept. It's just a way of attacking wealthy people. And, I think it's inappropriate. We all got to work together and pull together. The reason the market is doing what it's doing is people are sitting at home getting the checks from the government, okay? And this fair share is a bullshit concept. It's just a way of attacking wealthy people. And,
Thank you.
Yeah. So when he says work together, I had a giggle the first time I heard it. After he just got done saying what he was saying, I didn't know who that guy is. I didn't want to know. I know you know, Jarod. Yeah, just fuck these guys. Like I said, there's so many of them thinking it goes in line with what Jarod was already saying. That dude doesn't represent anyone that I associate with. That's for sure. But there's a whole bunch of them out there all the time. And this class and racial warfare is on. Like it's on right now. And I don't know how it's going to end. Quite exciting. Unfortunately, we're involved in it.
So I hear both of you, and I'm excited that there's this kind of like people will be heard, right?
Yeah.
And I hope that there's more of that through the ballot box, through direct action, through whatever, through all tools. I hope that the primary tool gets a little more refined. This feels to me, the way that we are heard now is a digital mob, right? This is the way that people make their noises, and it's a very imprecise tool. And friends have sent me some very worrisome things from that same message board where it's like, I think there's some hangover from Gamergate, which I didn't really follow very well, but there was some terrible misogyny in Gamergate. I know this, right? And storming the Capitol physically, right, had a lot of the same rhetoric. I know there's some anti-Semitism in both, etc. Like I'm kind of hoping that like the movie scene in the old Western where they get the pitchforks and they go like get the bad guy, like that's what we're doing now. I hope that we refine that so that we're a little better at figuring out punishment and crime and appropriate response. Ideally, this comes from like the U.S. Attorney's Office or the Attorney General or whatever. But like, I do feel like this is a very rough and scary tool. And I'm not sure everybody on that forum is like an ally, right? Like, but okay, I get it. They're feeling this today. All right, the people are being heard. Now let's just kind of like tune that in a little bit.
Now you're being ridiculous.
We
Genius for sure, but ridiculous. Attorney General.
I wanted to talk about COVID, the COVID vaccine as it relates to the Black community. And Mark Spears, the Undefeated, excellent writer, did an interview with Dr. Leroy Sims, who the NBA has been using as sort of their person to talk about the coronavirus vaccine and the various things they're going to do. And there's something interesting that he talked about as it relates to Black people and the coronavirus vaccine in the article. And in his answer about talking about why the story is Black people don't want to take the vaccine. And it isn't so much that. He says, we're suspicious of the system. The system has kept us away from access. The conversation needs to turn away from why are Black people still suspicious, and we need to address institutional untrustworthiness. And to me, that is so vital here. Like, when you hear, oh, Black people are more likely to die from COVID and all these different things, it isn't because Black people are anti-vaxxers or anti-science. What this racial situation has been in this country has barred Black people historically from is access to information, right? And access to the same tools that everybody else has. These are the issues and the systems that we're fighting. So when we talk about the issues within the Black community, it is about, hey, how can we get the same access? How can we level the playing field? Back to what I talked about in the first 9x90, right? It isn't about us having 3 yachts like, the Paul Allen family. It's about leveling the playing field. Although Henry probably wants a yacht, but
3 yachts, please, Jarod.
Who wouldn't want a yacht? Right. What
You gotta
the
clean
cost is,
stuff, though. I think it's a lot of maintenance.
the cost is different. Yeah, but if you can have a yacht, you have people maintaining it. So, yeah, let's listen in and then I'll talk.
Dwayne Ellington, who's working against Caruso. Blake gets it back, fires over Wesley Matthews and fills it up. Blake's having a heck of a game. Derrick Rose probing, now fires, fills it up over Schroeder. Dishes to Stewart. Now Jeremy Grant finds Blake for the long gun. It goes! This is a Blake.
Yeah, so Blake Griffin and Derrick Rose yesterday helped beat the Lakers, who did not have Anthony Davis. And for just a few moments, we can remember how incredible those two guys were in their prime. Derrick Rose is still actually playing solid basketball. Not great. I know his EPM numbers on dunks and threes aren't so great, but his PR is good. It's over 18. He was really good last year, actually. Blake made 5 of 10 from 3. Incredible, but it's also a sign there's not much else he can do anymore. It seems anyway. I hope that it isn't the case, but I don't know that we have an athlete that's probably underappreciated more than Blake Griffin the last 10 years because of where he's played, and only a couple of these years were they very, very good. But what a marvelous player when you consider what he used to be, and then he learned to be a 3-point shooter. Just to turn the clock back, it was great to see.
Old people, yay.
But that's what us old people do.
Hey, there's Tom. All right, so this is Craig. G, you mind sharing this Craig Unger, this little Guardian tweet? Okay, look at this. The perfect target. Russia cultivated Trump as an asset for 40 years. And this is a English newspaper story based on a forthcoming book from Craig Unger. Craig Unger wrote House of Trump, House of Putin. I heard an interview where he described how he did that book, which is basically he just looked up public records of who owned property in Trump Tower, and then he started chasing down who those people were. This to me is the most sober, least conspiracy-minded approach a journalist could possibly have to figuring out what's going on. And what he found was, in a super sober way, like Russian mobsters, like it's kind of undeniable, bought tons of Trump Tower, often in cash, like the second it opened. And you end up with this like decades of, it sounds like a crazy conspiracy theory, and now he has this guy. Now he has this agent telling how they did it for 40 years. And the big takeaway here is it had an effect I didn't see coming, which is if you let people believe it was the Russia hoax, then it seems like Trump's enemies are the liars. which is part of the reason you stormed the Capitol, right? But it's like, it was never a hoax.
No.
So, the sort of change of the Republican Party and who they answer to is interesting. And I want to play Representative Alejandro Ocasio-Cortez on Chris Hayes.
I actually sense a profound difference between the Republican caucus of last term, the 115th Congress, and the Republican caucus of this term that we are now, a few weeks into at this point. And that difference was that it really felt that last term, the Republican caucus was one of extreme fealty to Donald Trump. There were some that were true believers, others that simply remained quiet out of cowardice and out of fear of the president's retribution. But this term, there are legitimate white supremacist sympathizers that sit at the heart and at the core of the Republican caucus in the House of Representatives.
Right,
and when you see someone like
and when you think about people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Josh Hawley and various, these people aren't QAnon right-wing fringe people. They are now at the center and amassing power within the Republican Party. This is extremely dangerous, folks, because in a two-party system, this is the other side. We got a problem.
We do. All right, so our buddy, I think it was Yaron, wrote this. I can't even see our document right now for some reason. Yeah, so he wrote about Jaylen Brown and how he's using the mid-range shot to reach a different level. But the secret to this, to making shots in the mid-range, and we can argue over what really mid-range is being able to dribble the ball to get to the mid-range. With the absence of some what we call pin downs or wide pins or cross screens and other things you can get a guy open. We used to call them Rip Hamilton stuff because Rip would get a bunch of 17, 18 footers. You've got to be able to dribble the ball to get there. And way back 7 years ago, whatever, at ESPN, Henry and I did a show, and I talked about Andrew Wiggins as a rookie. And I said the key for him to reaching his potential is he's got to be able to dribble the ball with some degree of adeptness. He's got to be able to get by people off the dribble to get to that mid-range. I call it the second box, to get to the basket, to get fouled more. And he's never developed it. And so as you watch all these really long, amazing, talented players, as they come up starting at the rookie year, just always think about this. Jason Tatum was a frustrating player until he could dribble the ball. And last year he was an MVP candidate because he could really dribble it. And that gets you wherever you want to go. This year, Jaylen Brown has copied that same thing and is actually probably this year better than Jason Tatum. And it's what makes Kevin Durant so magical, right? It's what makes James Harden so unguardable, and on and on and on. If they can handle the ball, it opens up a game hugely for them. Credit Jaylen Brown. And if Wiggins learns to do that,
he's tapping the clock.
I couldn't even see it. Come on, legal.
That's the first time I've seen that. That's good. You might even remember 150 years ago, it feels like I wrote a story about the Milwaukee Bucks. That was Monday. But kind of felt like enough with the Bucks, right? But then just before we start the show today, 33-year-old Bucks executive Alexander Lasry, a potential candidate for U.S. Senate, got COVID-19 vaccine ahead of most Wisconsinites. He contends he was just lucky to jump the line. This reminds me, and then basically the idea is that, there are some vaccines that are their time is coming up and they have to give them to somebody, so they gave them to Alex. Judy, if you just click on the New Jersey 101.5 story. So this is a New Jersey hospital had this whole, basically they sent a letter to people who have donated saying, here's your personal contact so that they can help you navigate. Of course, we would never break the protocol. Like you have to be certain, age group, risk factor, but they help you navigate the ever-changing regulations so you can get, and then there's like, there are records of who got shots, and a lot of them are like 33-year-old son of hospital administrator, et cetera, et cetera. I'm in favor of everybody getting the vaccine. I think I said on the show, like, why don't they just let nurses be in charge of it and just give it to whoever, which is speed, right? So I'm not in general want a vaccine anyway. I do think though that if Alex Lasry especially is going to run for Senate, this is a little bit like draft dodging. right? Similar question, similar stakes. I think it's very appropriate for the media to track it. I don't think we should turn a blind eye. I think we should make a note, even if we're not going to yell at him.
I mean,
just before we go any further, it's bullshit that Judy wasn't tapping the clock just now. I know he's a relative, Judy. Come on, legal fair is fair. Justice is supposed to be blind.
The whole point of the system is you get to be in charge of the system, and then there aren't rules. All right, this is what we got. Here's Tom. Yay!
You walked into a hornet's nest, Tom. What's up, buddy?
The top end donors for hospitals would potentially get first in line, are we? That's not surprising.
Just like sisters in
that's
law.
unthinkable, John. What are you talking about?
Management.
Hello, Tom.
Okay, let me introduce Tom quickly. Everybody knows Tom Haberstroh, I think. But Tom, you wrote your first trip story. Now I'm forgetting. It published Thursday morning. You called me, I think, on Wednesday. Is this all right? Am I getting this right? To say basically Michael Jordan's in the middle of this GameStop thing, which seemed kind of cool. And sure enough, there was some. He has sold a chunk of the Hornets to Gabe Plotkin, who's the hedge funder in the middle of all this. You wrote a beautiful story about it, and now we're going to discuss. But first, you're going to give us some updates. Things have happened since we published the story.
Yeah, one of the things that happened since I wrote the story was that you just got dunked on by Judy, and all of us were screwing the establishment, which is you, Henry, by saying, "Hey, the leaders of this show somehow Jarod gets tossed to the side and says time's up, but you guys can continue." So the updates I have is that since that published, the losses have been growing and growing. So hedge funds that have short sold GameStop and these other retail brands or these mall brands, they've lost $70 billion.
Wow.
$70 billion in their short sales of these companies. And that was just like as of yesterday. So these hedge funds that Michael Jordan got financially in bed with sold a chunk of the Charlotte Hornets to these players, these hedge fund guys. That market is getting crushed. And so since the story ran, there's just more smoke coming out of here. And we're just learning about how deep this goes. So Melvin Capital, Gabe Plotkin's company, the hedge fund that he represents, that he runs, it was told that is down 30% as of Friday. A week later, no one seems to know the exact number of what that fund is down, but my sources tell me it is a lot larger than 30%, potentially as high as 80%. And we will see what happens on Monday. These hedge funds have to deliver news to their investors, their limited partners, how well they did or how poorly they did in the previous month. So February is coming up, and we'll probably learn more about how Michael Jordan's investors have done. And the other question is that we don't really know yet is how much money did he personally invest in these funds, Michael Jordan? So lots of stuff flying around. We don't know yet, but it is certainly very interesting that at the center of this, GameStop hedge fund frenzy is Michael Jordan, who sold a big chunk of his company, the Charlotte Hornets, to the hedge funds that are getting crushed.
Tom, do we know if they hedged that GameStop short? Do we know? So we know how much money we think we've lost on the short side. But did they hedge it on the other side? And how did that go? I didn't follow that part of it.
Yeah. So the problem is that when you do these short sells, you're highly leveraged. And so it's a multiplier effect. And maybe Jarod can explain this in better terms, but they are so leveraged in these positions that even if you are long or hedge in another direction, the magnitude, it's not like GameStop went to 20, it's that it went to 350 and 400. And so it's hard to recoup those losses, and they're trying to cover. It has been reported that they covered their losses on this one particular stock, and GameStop shorting that company, but who knows? The smoke hasn't cleared yet. So we're going to learn a lot more.
No, Tom, you pretty much said it well right there. First of all, that's why shorting a stock is so risky, right? Because there is no tell where you can lose profit-wise, right? Because stock starts at 80 cents and it goes up to $500, and we're not talking about 1,000 shares, we're talking about millions of shares. You're kind of fucked, right? Like, if you're not backed up on that side going long, and you generally don't go as long on the other side because that delta doesn't work for your math. Your whole goal is, how do I maximize as much profit in a short amount of time as possible? So these dudes.
Delta. I think we need to put a quarter in the jar and say Delta on the show. We can't have Deltas on here.
Regardless, and to Tom's point, they do have to talk to their limited partners and investors on Monday. And it reminded me, working out in Silicon Valley, I worked for this one startup. Monday or Tuesday, I think it was like our day where we'd be in front of the company and reporting like our units numbers. And there's always that trepidation of like, if your shit's down, it ain't gonna be a good time when you gotta stand in front of everybody and talk about it. And that's, I mean, this is obviously on a much grander scale. We're talking about people losing billions of dollars. It's,
I think like the whole NBA's revenue, last I heard a number, is something like in a typical year, like 9 or 10 billion. So revenue, right? So losing 70 billion is losing an amount that you could, purchase the whole thing, right? Like, right? They lost an NBA or so. I mean, it's something in that range, right?
A franchise, yeah, about.
Yeah, I mean, let's just say one of these funds has $12 billion in it, and they lose 75% of that. I mean, that's $8 billion right there. That's the entire NBA business just gone, right? So these are huge numbers. And look, as long as people are going to be buying Jordans, like Michael Jordan's gonna be okay, right? Like Jordan's brand and Nike are not going away tomorrow, so Michael Jordan's going to be okay. But when we talk about, and by the way, Jarod, call me Tim from now on, because that's Jarod earlier.
Or Tommy.
Not the first time Jarod's been called
It
Tim.
happens all the time.
Yeah, Tim, you can call me Tim. Lots of people call me Tim. So I think that's a big story. Is what is the fallout? Like, we don't know. The smoke hasn't cleared yet. These reports are trickling out about Melvin Capital and these other hedge funds, but that was Friday before GameStop went through the roof. He had already lost 30% of his fund, and that was a week ago. So we'll see. But the other thing that happened since the story ran is, Daryl Morey, the GM president of basketball operations for the 76ers, has chimed in too. He's saying, basically putting out a tweet with a graph of the pupil effect, or it's not the pupil, tulip effect, sorry, and saying, watch out. This GameStop could go to completely zero, and sending out a warning about retail investors, retail traders, like, be careful what you do. These day trading it's a dangerous game. So president of the 76ers, who also comes from the finance world, remember the MIT Sloan Conference, it's Sloan Conference. It's the business school at MIT is what we're talking about here. He might know a thing or two, but it's interesting. The former CEO of the 76ers is the CEO of the AMC movie theater company that's in the middle of this too. So the tentacles of this GameStop phenomenon is all over the NBA. Third thing that has happened is Anthony Tolliver, the NBPA, former NBA player, NBPA executive treasurer, has come out and weighs in on the Robinhood, basically cutting out any sort of buys on certain stocks, which seems very shady. Is that Robinhood, the app, is not letting people buy certain stocks. And overnight, they got an injection of $1 billion from VC firms, and suddenly, like, everything's okay again. It kind of, an app called Robinhood is suddenly taking $1 billion from very rich institutions and getting it funded into their app, while they say, hey, you retail investors are not allowed to partake on this side of the deals on these sort of stocks, out of an abundance of caution or risk protection of their investors. Like, that's not their job. Their job isn't to step in and say, hey, I don't think that's a good bet you're making. They're supposed to facilitate that bet. And now they're saying to their investors, hey, I know you want to buy GameStop, but you shouldn't be doing that.
Here's Randy Shane, who's usually here as a generic Knicks fan, but he actually has relevant knowledge in this area. Hi, Randy.
That's true. Hey, how are you?
Good. Do you want to tell us, we're a bunch of rubes here. Do you want to tell us what's going on with your view on GameStop?
Well, the only thing I would add so far that you haven't mentioned is that Gabe Plotkin, I know Caleb is very worried about this. Gabe Plotkin will raise a new fund in 5 minutes a year from now. Mark my word, it'll be called something else. It'll have to do with a stone and water. Those two things will be involved. So there's no need to be concerned about him. What I told Henry the other day, and I don't know that this is particularly relevant, but I literally got calls from my niece, my 31-year-old niece who ran Bernie Sanders' Nevada campaign, and my 22-year-old son, Dylan, who everyone on this podcast knows, both of whom identify as near communists, asking me to explain short selling. So Jarod, if your statement is always there's more of us than there is them, his entire house of commies were making like $10 each on GameStop. And then I told them, whatever you do, don't get in there now. Now the musical chairs, it's too late for you. Like this thing is going down.
Yeah. That is
Randy,
the challenge.
Randy, I'll point out, Randy, like Steve Cohen was had his fund shut down a few years ago for insider trading, pled guilty to 5 counts, opened up a family office or a family fund.
That's the hilarious part.
And now,
that's a family office.
And that's the guy. Not only that is that the guy who just bought the New York Mets, but he is also Gabe Plotkin's protege. Gabe Plotkin is the protege of Steve Cohen, and so if we want to see Exhibit A of what Gabe Plotkin might do next, it's just look at Steve Cohen.
Well, Steve Cohen, little known aside, my sister-in-law had an opportunity to date Steve Cohen in high school and opted not to because she wasn't a fan of his height. So that tells you what's going on there. But I've looked in I know Steve Cohen, unfortunately, better than I ever wanted to because my firm does investigations into hedge funds. So know all about him. And he's a fan favorite around our parts.
Like that, Randy, you have decades of expertise in investigating people like Steve Cohen, but just told us that we know everything we need to know about Steve Cohen from a dating episode in his high school.
Correct. That's correct. Well, the investigative part is a lot less interesting. There's no way on the planet, and certainly Tom, Tim, and Jarod can attest to this. It's impossible to beat the market consistently year over year over year for 20 years straight and not be cheating. It's just not possible. Steve Cohen is the Barry Bonds if Barry Bonds had been roiding from the beginning. He really is.
That. And actually, this is my obsession here is like, we are in a moment, and all these stories we're talking about today, where it's like, are you competent at your thing? Are you competent at business? Or are you better at cheating? Like, these are real questions, right? Like, and it's hard. It used to be somewhat easy to tell, right? Like when business success was like, oh, we have like Peter Holt has a Caterpillar dealership, right? And they sell tractors. Then you can see if they sell a lot of tractors or not. But now, like, what's going on here? Like, that SAC thing went down because of basically insider trading, which was brilliant for making trades.
Yeah.
And illegal. Like,
I mean, we do have to say that he didn't actually, right? I mean, technically it was the firm, not him, the family, all the rest of it. That's my giant caveat here.
Thank you, yes.
And so on.
Yes.
Do you need me more, Henry, or can I
think it's been super helpful. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
Try some honey lemon. It seems like you have a sore throat. Try some.
No, I've had a non-COVID related cough for 2 years. So
I just saw the finger on your neck. In Florida, we don't know what that is.
Bye.
Listen, guys.
We all know how I feel about the capitalist machine. But if Steve Cohen wants to get me a World Series title, I may overlook some things. That's the first thing. Okay. Moving on. Let's talk about.
Them's the rules.
Can we just talk about the idea that, first of all, you are even allowed to short sell a stock, okay? Just think about that for a minute. An investor person, not me, but like I'm a hedge fund. I borrow stock from a traditional place like JP Morgan, whatever. By the way, when JP Morgan lends me these stock, it's not actual, let's say I want, 200 million shares. They don't actually have control of 200 million shares. They may have, 75 million. And then it's like, all right, we got some other stuff around here. Well, we'll just call it 200. It's like, well, is it 200 or is it not 200? Well, how does that work? It doesn't matter. Just let's say it's 200. Okay, fine. It's 200. I get it at X price. Now it goes up to a certain number. It's bullshit. It is fucking bullshit. But yet it is allowed to continue on and on and on. People call it a shell game, a casino, and this idea of value and perceived value. None of this stuff is actually real, right? Like it isn't. But we've created all these instruments and funny graphs and charts and things that spike, and guys get on the news and talk about it, and it causes stock price to do this, and then the retail investor comes out and goes, "Oh my God, I gotta jump in on whatever stuff," and all that does is help them out. Okay, great. Now we're gonna move out when it's time, and as Randy so eloquently pointed, is musical chairs. When the music stops, they got chairs. Everybody else fucked, and that's really
Didn't Tesla just do that with in his bio about a stock?
Okay, this is the next thing I have.
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk tweeted overnight.
Yeah, Elon Musk.
Yeah. He changed his Twitter profile to just like hashtag Bitcoin.
Yep.
And the overnight markets went bananas. The crypto markets were just going. I think the number was 20% overnight, just by virtue of Elon Musk changing his Twitter profile.
Yeah. His bio, yeah.
That everyone just rushed to the market and started buying up whatever he was tweeting or didn't even tweet about. It was just one change of his Twitter profile led to a giant shift in the market. So when we talk about Elon Musk doing this, you might be like, what's the NBA relevance? Well, Elon Musk has allied, his ally in this is Chamath Palihapitiya, who is a guy who is like almost like a demigod among the tech space from Facebook. He has 1 million followers on Twitter, and he's also a part investor or an investor in the Golden State Warriors. So we have a Golden State Warriors tech giant who is aligning himself with Elon Musk to take down these hedge funds, the entire model. And that's Michael Jordan right in the middle of it. Is like you have these tech guys who are trying to change the system and screw the establishment or whatever. And then he said that essentially that on CNBC yesterday, Chamath. And then you have on the other side, these hedge fund billionaires on Wall Street and the Hamptons. And it's just Elon Musk, Stevie Cohen, Michael Jordan. It's just, it's fascinating. And what you should do is go on Twitter and at Brian Koppelman, you basically wrote the Billion Show, and just harass him that like, hey, have you heard this GameStop story? It's the greatest troll job out there right now.
He is so angry right now. Everybody's, yes, I know. I'm not rewriting the Billions episode for this. Thank you.
Can I just say I've been duped? Because I thought we were going to talk about like the way the Mavericks rescreen up top in the fourth quarter with Luka and KP.
Not today.
What are we doing? What's happening? They don't say bring it in on Wall Street. I tell you that.
Henry, who are the other hedge fund guys, NBA owners? I know it's Lazary and Edens. I know it's what's his face in Philly. Who else are hedge fund guys?
I have a list. I remember one of the big rules of the pandemic on the show is we don't have quizzes. I could go quiet and search my computer and come up with a list for you. That would probably be good.
I do believe that Sequoia Capital is one of the lead investors in the Robinhood cash infusion overnight. Is that Sequoia Capital is run, or one of the investors is Kyle Lowry, the guy who pushed Kyle Lowry in the finals.
Yes.
Mark Stevens.
Yeah, so Sequoia Capital, Mark Stevens, I believe, was one of the principal investors that gave part of the $1 billion that Robinhood got yesterday. But like, I'm not a cryptocurrency guy. I don't know this space, but one of our favorite Twitter follows in the NBA space, Heraldus Vulgaris, it's one of his most passionate things that he tweets about.
Yeah,
is cryptocurrency. And so you don't have to get very far removed, Coach, from like NBA voices being very invested, no pun intended, in this story that's happening.
We could go for days. We could map it. This GameStop one is like, we don't have time for all of the connections to the NBA. Some of which are reportable, some of which are not, and we're going to learn a lot more. But yeah, here we go, Sequoia. I think I'm right in saying that Mark Stevens was like the original mover and shaker of Sequoia, but maybe not active there now. Check me on that. But yeah, wow. So Jarod, yesterday Tom and I recorded the Habershow with Amin, and I love Amin. Amin's authoritative on every single subject on planet Earth, except we learned he said at the start of the show that he'd just been on Investopedia for 3 minutes before the show started, which was the first time he ever had any exposure to this idea of short selling. And he was backed all up. So then Tom heroically tried to explain it to him. And then Amin came up with the question, which I think you can answer, which is, I think you did answer it, which is, he's like, why? First of all, he's like, who are we borrowing these shares from? And then he's like, why would that person lend them to me to tank? Right? like, good question. And then my follow-up was, so then Tom had a good educated guess at the answer to that. But then you just answered, and then I'm like, wait a second. I know this whole thing's fucking horseshit because there's 130%. Like the contracts that have been shorted are more than the total of actual outstanding shares, which is perfect proof they're not really borrowing them, right? Because they don't fucking exist. Pardon me, those of you listening with young children. So Jarod, you just explained it, right? This is what's happening is they don't actually have to come up with the shares to lend?
No, it's all perception, right? Like that's the thing when a company issues 200 million of Class A preferred stock, it's like, where do these 200 million shares, where are they? They're not physical pieces of things. They just go out into the mythical stock market universe. And then, okay, JP Morgan buys X. We have to move a certain amount to this company and this corporation. It's shells, man. It's just shells. It's not real. It's just moving things back and forth because think about it, right? If my goal is to short something, I want a company to be shitty. Like I'm actively trying to bankrupt and make a company disappear and fall apart. Like this whole thing is just, again, a way in which corporations and the elite class do this sort of back and forth thing with each other, like behind the scenes, right? It's one hedge company making a bet against another, and who's going to be right first, right? Think about like race car driving, and you're playing chicken to the end of the cliff. All right, who's going to slam on their brakes first before careening over the ravine? That's essentially what this game is, and it's fucking insane. But man, we love it.
Dwayne Wade is with Amin. Dwayne Wade tweeted last night an explainer about short selling, and he said, "Thank you. I was lost. Okay, I'm back." Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it in basic terms, right? Like, okay, I'm gonna borrow some stock. Let's say the stock is $10. Okay, cool. I borrowed it at 10, whatever interest I got to pay for the borrow. I want to then get it, sell it right for way lower, sell it for, buy it back for $3. So that's a $7 difference. I will pocket that $7 difference, right, on the stock price and minus the interest I got to pay back for actually, getting it from the person. Now multiply that times this imaginary number of 2 million, 3 million, 5 million, 10 million, whatever fake number is out there. And that's how these companies make their money. And as Randy pointed out before, the reason why hedge funds are able to get the kind of capital they get is, think about it. If you invest money, what are you doing it for? The promise of making more, right? Well, I'm telling you, I'm going to beat the market. Well, how the hell are you going to beat the market consistently by 20 and 30%? As Randy said, that is fucking impossible. Like, you can't do it, except if you're doing shit like this, right? Extremely risky and cheating. That's how you beat the market.
Go read if you haven't. If you want to learn more about this, there's a great book called The Black Edge. More Black Edge, inside information, dirty money, and the quest to bring down the most wanted man on Wall Street. It's about the SAC Capital's Stephen Cohen fund. And just remember, this guy's tweeting at Dave Portnoy at Barstool, and they're having a Twitter back and forth about what's happening here. Like, this is sports. Like, we're in the middle of it. And so maybe we should talk about pick and roll defense, but it is fascinating to see that all these players at the top are now like hanging out and mingling.
Right. I was just going to, I do want to get to not pick and roll defense. I want to get to all your thoughts on Bradley Beal. But as I said to Henry yesterday, I was joking before. Of course, we should be talking about this kind of stuff. And as Tom just said, players are going to be involved. We have some players who are worth a lot of money, right? And I happen to know some players who are very into investing and want to learn more because they're thinking about their life after they play. And I personally, Tom, was thrilled to see your article under TrueHoop yesterday. Obviously, Henry gave me the heads up. And knowing that your brain is on this, Henry's been on the owner thing for a while now. Yeah, we need to be talking about this kind of stuff. It's very much the real world right now.
It's all. I feel like it's the great convergence. Wait, Tom, I think you have more. Do you have more you want to tell us? Do we complete your list?
He wants to tell us.
I think
where he wants to tell us where he thinks Bradley Beal is going to be traded to, or where he should be traded to. I'm trying to steer the conversation.
He should be traded to Citadel. Sequoia Capital.
What do you think, Tom? Like, who should do a deal? Who could? Because if this had not happened in the last 48 hours, we'd be probably talking about Bradley Beal being asked, "Are you frustrated?" And his very simple response of, "Is the sky blue?" That is a lot for Bradley Beal to say. He's not passive aggressive. He's not LeBron, that way. He's frustrated. He's playing amazing and sucks. So what do you think, Tom?
Well, I'm thinking about which part of this GameStop story can fit into this Bradley Beal. I got it. Okay. Silicon Valley is trying to take down hedge funds. They're feeling very powerful right now and want to prove that they're smarter than everybody and screw the hedge fund people, right? Okay. They might be right. They might be wrong.
Right.
What if the Warriors put Wiseman and the Minnesota pick next year on the table and try to get Bradley Beal?
They could have done that this summer.
They could have, but they wanted to see if this team with Kelly Oubre could work. I don't know if the Wizards who drafted Kelly Oubre would want to get him back, but that is an interesting formation here is do the Golden State Warriors, who just dropped James Wiseman from the starting lineup, do they try to float him and that pick to try to get Bradley Beal and bring him in, not as someone to replace Klay Thompson, but someone, if Klay Thompson comes back in a year and needs someone to share the shoulders of being the off-ball shooter with Stephen Curry, Bradley Beal, to me, is the next Ray Allen. He is so talented and slithery with the ball and efficient. His jumper even reminds me of Ray Allen, but that's more your purview, Coach. I just think that whoever gets Bradley Beal is going to be thrilled.
So before David speaks, I just want to let you know, David would not. If David would trade his own children for James Wiseman, just so you're aware.
Yeah, but I think he would for Bradley Beal too, right?
No, to be fair, if you're Golden State, you still have to solve the problem in the middle, right? I'm an enormous Bradley Beal fan, but there's still
Robin
a problem
Lopez is on the Washington Wizards right now, and maybe that could be a good placeholder for whatever they're looking for.
Yeah, I think I have the best spot, although I want to get all your opinions because it's a little bit risky. I think it's a perfect opportunity. And remember, let me preface it by saying this. I'm a big believer in always looking at about a 5-year window, not a 2-year window. The Utah Jazz can trade Donovan Mitchell for Bradley Beal. Not straight up. But the Utah Jazz, the best team in the league right now, the way they're playing with shooting threes all over the place, with Gobert and Derek Favors at the rim defensively, they're top 3 in defense. They're top 5 or 6 in offense. Beal's better than Donovan. And I agree with Tom about Ray Allen. I think Beal's going to be good for a while. Now, you're trading a guy that you just signed an extension to. I don't love that part. So let's be fair. But let's be clear. But I'm telling you, Donovan and Rudy Gobert are still our best friends.
Tom, we like this trade because if Beal goes to the Jazz, that opens back up talking about billionaires. New owner Ryan Smith. Let's talk about the money.
Tech God Ryan Smith.
Right on back.
It's true. Now TrueHoop has only become we only talk about billionaires through the prism of basketball. It's not the other way around. So I think Donovan. All right. So think about the optics of that. Okay. Donovan Mitchell, homegrown talent in Utah. Rudy Gobert, homegrown talent in Utah. They're on a 10-game or whatever winning streak right now. Utah.
10-game, yeah.
You sell high on Donovan Mitchell to buy low on Bradley Beal.
I'm just saying, if you're Utah, are you better in the next 2 years? Now he's got 1 more year, and so you could lose him, and so you have to have a conversation about getting an extension done next year, right? You have to have that conversation about, do we have him for at least 5 years?
And that's a dicey. That's a Salt Lake City is not DC, and it's not
sure
Gainesville,
but he might win some championships there. You have to have that. It's worth having that conversation. You can't do it if you can't lock him in.
Well,
he's better than Donovan Mitchell for sure, and they're already the best team in the league right now.
The question also is, what do you anticipate Donovan Mitchell's ceiling being as good as Bradley Beal or better?
Right. I don't think so.
And then if you don't, then I think it's worth doing. But again, to Tom's point, Utah ain't DC, or it's pretty, I mean, NBA players hate Utah for obvious reasons. So I don't know how lucky you're going to be trying to get him to stay there and sign an extension. So I like the idea, but if you can't get the extension, not going to work. We talked about Miami on Wednesday. We talked about Denver. Obviously, Golden State makes sense.
Do you think Miami's possible, guys?
You have to get rid of
everyone.
Duncan, probably.
Everyone except for the big two has to go for Miami.
And
Nunn, Hero, Robinson, gone.
So Amin El-Hassan on Lebatard's show said this, and it reminds me of the Family Guy little scene where Peter Griffin is sitting there in front of like a salesman who's like, hey, I can give you a yacht or this mystery box over here. And Peter Griffin's like, ready to say the mystery box. And his wife Lois is like, no, we get the yacht. And he goes, no, I mean, the mystery box could be anything. It could even be a yacht. And like Amin's point was Bradley Beal is who you would want Tyler Hero to be, right? Best case scenario, Tyler Hero is Bradley Beal, or you could get Bradley Beal in his prime. And so, maybe Tyler Hero doesn't become Bradley Beal, in which case trading him now makes a lot of sense. But best case scenario, Tyler Hero becomes an all NBA, perennial all-star like Bradley Beal. And that's why you make the move. Is Jimmy Butler isn't going to be 31 or 32 years old anymore. Bam Adebayo is amazing right now. The window is here. So we capitalize on Tyler Hero's promise after what an amazing run he did in Orlando and exchange that promise for a reality, which is this guy's averaging an efficient 34 in the NBA right now.
I'll fight that a little bit though. So Bradley Beal's 27, which I just had to Google. In all likelihood, he's going down, and his salary isn't. And you have to win a championship, you have to have a roster where the value is ridiculous, right? So you got to pay X while you're getting the value of 1.5X or 1.8X. Like Bradley Beal will be pretty close to his salary, I would guess, right?
Do we know that what the prime age is now? And maybe this is a good deeper story for TrueHoop.
27 to 33.
Yeah, James Harden and Steph Curry are playing great right now.
Okay, but if you yes, but we don't want to make decisions based on outliers, right? So and also players who put up huge stats are players who get the ball, who are players who are famous, who players have been doing it for a long time. Right? If Tyler Hero were just as good as James Harden right now, he just wouldn't touch the ball that much. We'd never know, right? So these dudes, these machine learning guys did a project for us at the beginning of last season, and basically it's very hard to find an NBA player who improves after the age of 25. Like they exist, but the group is going down after 25. Even worse at Bradley's position, right? If you're taller, it's a little different. But at Bradley's position, like the cliff is approaching, right? It's not approaching next year, but he has had injuries, to be honest. He's had serious injuries. And his defensive stats have been absolute, worst in league dog shit. It might be because of his team, might be because he doesn't care, but that's something you have to really answer for before you break up the best team in the league to get him, right? And so to me, or a contender like the Heat, right? To me, the argument for Tyler Hero is he might be worth quadruple his salary this year. Bradley Beal won't. Right, so you can have him on the salary. You can have a roster that you pay $100 million. It's worth $150 million. With Tyler Hero on it, it's a tougher one with Bradley Beal, unless you think he's worth $70 million or something, which he might be. But I think he won't be by the end of this deal for sure.
So this is obviously with Tom and everybody on here. This is the Smart Person podcast, right? So question about this: how do you make that determination, right, Henry? So what's Daryl's thing? If you have a 5% chance to win the title, you go all in, something like that. All right. So if Bam, how old is Bam? 25? Something, he's young. He's fucking all NBA playing right now, right? That's okay. Jimmy.
He's way younger than 25.
Okay, 22. He's all NBA level right now. Okay. Jimmy, 31. Let's say he maintains his level as he was last year. Do you then say, because to your point, Henry, about trading away for Utah, trading away the best team in the league, breaking it up to go forward in the future, it may hurt you maybe regular season. But what is it about the playoff? How do we make the determination come playoff time? Yeah, it's great to have all this stuff, but in the playoffs, you need Anthony Davis, LeBron. You need these dudes because they matter, right? How do you make that calculus? Because as good as the Heat were, they didn't have enough Jimmy Butlers to beat Los Angeles last year, right? So how do you make that calculus?
frankly, I mean, maybe I'm biased here, but like, Dirk was the player who wasn't good enough to really matter in the playoffs until he fucking won a championship, and then suddenly playing the same exact way, he was one of those guys. Like, I think it's just basketball, right? Like, to me, like, be a really good basketball team, and I think you definitely want to have players who are accelerating, right? You want to have some players who are on the upswing, right? So they're hard to come by. It's hard to find like someone you want to give minutes to and the ball to, who are 22, but you want to have some of those on your roster because they can run around and jump even at the end of the year when you're tired, right? So to me, like, you want to, I'm not saying I'd never trade Tyler Hero. I'm not even like, Tyler Hero is not the pinnacle of my argument here, but I think that, like, I personally would sooner trade the super highly paid 31-year-old Jimmy Butler than the 22-year-old guaranteed to be super value Tyler Hero. Just to give yourself a decade of relevance.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, and I think Bradley Beal with stress fractures in his injury history, like, are you past that? I don't know. I don't know what his long-term prognosis is injury wise, but this is where the Jimmy Butler thing comes into play. Is when Jimmy Butler was being tossed around as a candidate to be traded to the Miami Heat, I was like, man, that means that like that championship window, if you're getting Jimmy Butler, is like razor thin. It's like 1 or 2 years. And then Bam Adebayo happened and ripped open that window again. Is like, now the Miami Heat have a little bit more wiggle room to be like, yeah, Jimmy Butler might have a window of like 1 or 2 years where we get max level Jimmy Butler championship 1, 2, or 3 on a championship team. But what they also got is these maybe the best shooter in the NBA in Duncan Robinson. Tyler Hero, they get as like a mid-round, first-round pick, and he turns out to be an amazing basketball player. And now you're kind of playing with house money. Is you went from going all in on an older, over-the-hill player in Jimmy Butler, and now you just have this like maybe this window that might be for the next 10 years. So for the Miami Heat, it's not just about Bradley Beal. It's like, do you cash in those players that have production of a multiplier above your salary now? Or do you say, look, we have a lot of time to do this. Bam Adebayo is 23 years old. Like, we got a longer runway here. Bradley Beal go to Golden State. Hey, there's going to be another Bradley Beal next year, and we'll pounce on that when Bam Adebayo is 24 or 25, and he is an MVP.
And I think that, right, like, Coach, you always talk about that, about the runway, right? Give yourself 10 years of relevance versus trying to go all in for 2 or 3. But that's Pat and Andy's challenge, right? Like, how do you stop yourself from pulling that rash trigger decision to be like, fuck it, we're so good right now. Can we just make this one move? And now we're a legit title contender. I mean, if you're Miami right now, the way things are going the year with COVID and everything kind of ravaging them, maybe they just quote unquote punt this year, right? Keep developing, and then, see where you are next season. I don't know, it's tough.
I'm a big believer in the 5 and 10 year approach. I think that's the best thing you can do for your fan base, as I've said on the show many times and I've written about. The reason why I'm so intrigued with Utah is because you don't have to sacrifice that 5 and 10 years. You just really have to trade one player. You have to throw a couple of guys in. Their first round pick this year, I think, sucks. He might be good one day. I don't know. The big kid from Kansas. You can throw him in. And the Wizards need a big guy too.
Wait, do we know his name? What's his name?
I forget his name. Azubuike. Yeah. I'm not a fan. He may end up being fine, but no one expects him to be great. He was drafted late for a reason.
Coach only loves Wiseman rookie. He hates all the rookies but Wiseman. That's the only
No, that's not true at all. And so you're and now listen, the Jazz have some concerns. Mike Conley's having a career year, and he's not young. He's an all-star. If they had an all-star, unfortunately for him, he may never really get it because he made a half a game. But Rudy Gobert just signed his new extension, and he's actually still getting better. It's amazing. Royce O'Neal still has a couple years left on his deal, and he's having a career year. They've got a Jordan Clarkson just signed, and he's the most unguardable guy since Ben Gordon played off the bench. Like, he's Jamal Crawford. He's Lou Will. I cannot stand watching Jordan Clarkson play, but nobody can guard him right now. And I don't know how that plays in the playoffs, which is another reason why I want Beal even more than Donovan in theory. I don't care what the Jazz do.
Lou Williams, it's funny, right? Lou Williams, I remember when he was with Houston. Remember that little window where he was with Houston and he just like completely melted in the playoffs.
Yep.
And I kind of felt that way is like Jordan Clarkson on the Cavs in a finals. Like, it was the biggest story in the finals was he was like 0 for like 47 in the postseason. And it was like these charity sympathy articles being written. Like, this feels it's hard to watch Jordan Clarkson right now. So to your point is, Bradley Beal, we don't know what Bradley Beal looks like in the playoffs. I'm not equating him with Jordan Clarkson, but the idea of like going all in for the Miami Heat, it's not just about, the regular season anymore. It's like Bradley Beal has never been in an NBA finals or close to it. What does that mean? We know Jordan Clarkson in this stage of his career, it might be a lot better, but Lou Williams, it's been tough for Lou Williams to prove that he is Lou Williams in those 16 wins in the postseason.
The Heat have to give a lot more than Utah would. Utah's one All-Star, and you're getting an All-Star back. The Heat are giving up all that stuff. Yeah. The Jazz give up one All-Star. Go ahead, Henry.
There's a little bit of in the long-term, short-term planning thing, there's a little bit of like, we dissect the champions, right? And champions also billionaires in business, like they're the ones who will tell you that they went all in, right? So we're like, oh, well, if you want to be like them, you have to go all in. It's like, no. The strategy of all in doesn't generally make you a champion. It's just like champions happen to use the strategy of all in. It's not the same thing, right? So I think there's like I think it's a little bit more of a crapshoot than any of us really like to admit. I think you could probably engineer your roster. Pat Riley could probably go all in to get themselves guaranteed like top 5 contention, and then it's just luck. And the luck usually goes to LeBron, right? Like it's luck or LeBron after that, right? So to me, like, okay, it's a 1 in 30 prospect, which is not something you can really strategize your way to the top of, right? It's really like such a lottery that you can strategize near the top. So to me, like, okay, so you're just buying a lottery ticket in a lottery that's maybe 5 teams or whatever. To me, it's like, how many tickets do you want to buy? Like, this is now the strategy to me is just buy more tickets, because it's not really the case that you can make roster moves mid-season that result in you being one of 2. You're going to make roster moves to be one of 5, and then buy 10 tickets because then you'll actually probably win a championship.
So with that idea of 5, so the championship in theory is coming from 1 of 5 teams. So who are those 5 teams?
Right now?
That's David's job.
I mean, I don't think it's so hard, and I don't know if it's 5 or not. The obvious ones we know about, Milwaukee and the LA teams. I think Utah is a contender if they because they made a change last summer when Quinn just said that pandemic break. We wrote about this, Henry and I did, and talked about this. The teams that best handle the break, we're going to see come the bubble. And Utah didn't, they lost obviously in 7 games to Denver, but they found a new way to play, which is just chuck as many threes as possible with guys that actually can shoot. And that has absolutely changed Utah's projection going forward. And we see what's happening now. Denver is on fire, and Jokic is probably the MVP of the league. And they've got young guys that can still get better than Jamal Murray and MPJ at the very least, right? Bol, whatever. I think they're real. On the East side, the Sixers to me are legitimate because Embiid, Simmons, and all that shooting. Embiid's an MVP candidate too. I'm not sure. I don't know if I missed anyone. That's probably. I mean, the Celtics probably can't quite get there.
One last thing on this Miami Heat, whether they go all in.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, the Miami Heat don't let assistant coaches go out from Spo and Riley's umbrella often, but they let one coach go this year. DC, Dan Craig. He's like gonna be a head coach in 1 or 2 years.
Right.
Where did he go? The Miami Heat let him go to the Clippers. And I just wonder, are there any star players who are going to be a free agent after next summer? Like, what if Kawhi Leonard and not Paul George, but Kawhi Leonard, do you want Bradley Beal or Kawhi Leonard going forward? I don't know, but maybe the Heat do. Which one they prefer.
Wait. Let me understand what you're saying here. They sent Dan Craig out as a secret agent to send Kawhi back?
That's precisely what I'm saying.
Oh, this is good. Legal, we need another hour, Legal. Come on.
Overtime.
Yeah, maybe like Kenny Atkinson's over there. Maybe Kenny Atkinson is like a agent for some other team. Yeah.
Look at David made a joke about overtime and Judy's freaking out. Tom, the one thing that's going to happen is the show's going to end on time because Judy knows where we live and she will hunt us down and kill us if we go over. So the show's going to end soon. I just want everyone to be prepared for that. Judy's going to
fall down.
That's a very important point Tom made, though.
Yeah, we love talking to you guys. It's nothing personal.
Instead of a timer, it's just a gun.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Feels like that a little bit. All right. Well, thank you, Jarod. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, David.
All right, have a good
Thank
weekend.
you,
Be safe,
Randy.
everyone.
Have a
Thank
good
you,
weekend,
guys.
everybody. We'll see you next week.